The first race of the weekend for the KCMG Formula 4 Cup is coming up. The qualifying race is about to get underway here at the Paul Ricard circuit, the single-seater track element of the FIA Motorsport Games. David Addison and John Watson trackside, and a grid full of young Formula 1 hopefuls are about to head on track, which include the Brazilian champion Pedro Clero, the Danish champion Julius Dinesen, and the Italian and German champion Kimi Antonelli, and he very much is the man to beat. He got himself in a bit of strife at the end of qualifying, tangled with a car right at the very end, but the stewards had a look at it and decided that actually it was one of those things, so no real blame apportioned to either party. Kimi Antonelli then starting on pole position on this one-by-one staggered grid. This qualifying race, 20 minutes in length, it determines the grid for the main race on which the medals are awarded. They're all in the same car. They are KCMG funded chassis with Abarth 1400cc turbocharged hybrid engines. They all run on Pirelli rubber. They're all run by one team, by High-Tech GP as well. So it's the same car, same team. Everybody has the same equipment going into this race. It means, John Watson, that talent will out.
Well, I've been waiting all weekend to see this race get underway. This is the future in terms of single-seater racing for maybe the next decade or even beyond that. And already we've got some outstanding names. I mean, first of all, Andrea Kimi Antonelli just won the Italian Championship last weekend. You got the son of, you got Charlie Wirtz, the son of, not Franz Wirtz, that's his grandfather.
That's right. Alex Wirtz, his
Alex
dad.
Wirtz, indeed. And a couple of others, Alistair Young and Pablo Sarrazin.
Pablo Sarrazin, yeah.
But this is representing what will be down the road in 5, 10, 15, even maybe 20 years' time. And all in the same car, same chassis. It's down to talent. And I just hope that that talent doesn't carry them away going into turn one. It's a big field, and I'm sure nobody's going to concede an inch, but sometimes it's better to give up than it is to end up in the barrier. Especially
as this race sorts out the grid for the main race. This isn't the race to win necessarily, it's the race to keep out of trouble. However, we'll find out exactly what happens very shortly. Eduardo Liberati, who races for KCMG in GT racing, is down on the grid, and also down there. Microphone in hand is Gemma Scott.
Well, I'm down here on the grid now, joined by KCMG representative and driver, Eduardo Liberati. Eduardo, you won the GT3 Championship in Italy this year, but you've raced in these particular cars in the past in Formula 4 in Italy.
Yes, I did. I was 15, so it's back in 2008. And that's how I started my career, and that's basically how all these guys are starting their career. So it's really emotional also for me to help KCMG in this project. I also drove these particular cars. I did the shakedown for a little bit of development of these cars. So it's a really emotional moment for me as well.
I mean, it's wonderful. KCMG have provided every single one of these cars. So many nations here taking part and all coming together. And for these drivers, like you say, the majority of the grid are under 20 years old. So they really are on the very early steps of their racing career and all aiming to get towards Formula 1.
Yeah, sure. The Formula 4 is the first step to Formula 1, and then for sure it's you're starting at 15, so most of them are between 15 and 17. And the particular thing about the motorsport games is that you're representing your nation, which usually doesn't happen because you're representing yourself or a team. But this time you have your nation written on your car, so it's a special moment, like you're representing your nation in World Cup soccer or whatever, and that's particularly motorsport because usually we don't have it. So that's a very special race weekend.
Yeah, I mean, watching the opening ceremony, watching some of these young guys come out and the stars in their eyes as they approached the stage and saw the audiences before them was really special. And we've got some really strong talent here. I mean, our Italian driver down the front here is incredibly quick, and he's hard to beat. Wirtz behind him there is putting in a good fight, but he's struggling to get there.
Yeah, I mean, Antonelli, he just won Italian Formula 4 and German Formula 4, so he has a strong background from this year. It was his first year in Formula 4, so for sure he's the guy to beat, and we already expected. But we have a strong grid as well of other guys competing in French F4, in Italian F4, Spanish F4. So we have strong guys here on the grid, and let's see how it goes.
And further back, who would you say we need to keep our eyes on?
For this race, I think Antonelli is the guy to beat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there for Belgium, you can see the car of Laurens Lesetua, who is another graduate of the karting scene, like just about everybody on this grid. And the Belgian entry starting on the 8th rank on this 1x1 staggered grid. The lights counting down as we're into the final 5 minutes on the grid. The lead car has just blasted around, ready to park itself where it might be needed should an intervention be necessary. The grid walk comes to an end, and gradually the grid will clear and the drivers left to their own devices. Again, to make the point, this does not win medals. This sorts out the grid for the main race. So this is the race where you keep out of trouble.
We said every time I go on air, think about turn 1, think about the checkered flag. The two things are not one in turn 1, it's one when the race is finished. So every one of these competitors, and many of them are very young, some of them are still, let's call it by adult standards, adolescents. But when they get testosterone gets going, the red mist comes down, sometimes judgment seems to disappear. And I just hope that we have a clean start. And it's a 20-minute race. I hope it's a clean race. And let's hope that it's a win about talent, not about maybe circumstances. We saw a finish to the GT Cup, and that was a safety car finish. Hopefully, we're not going to see a safety car finish, but it's in the hands of every one of these competitors, these nations, to ensure that they race hard, race clean, race fair, but avoid contact.
Looking there at the Serbian entry of Felipe Massa, who has been racing in the Spanish F4 Championship this year. He's had a second place as his best result. Did have a race win in the Spanish Championship last year. Very quick karter in his youth. And Felipe Massa will line up 6th on the grid. There you can see the Danish car, Julius Dinesen, who is this year's Danish champion. But before we go any further down the grid, let us hear from a Formula 1 star of the past. Felipe Massa, driver's representative, is here.
It's always nice to see who you bump into on a grid. Felipe Massa here supporting a lot of the junior drivers over the course of this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's nice to be here, to give some motivation, for them. It's a very important race. How motivated they are, to try to get the trophy for the country, for their home country. And I think it's always nice to push them, Really a pleasure to be here in the FIA Motorsport Games.
And there's some very famous names on this grid with famous fathers.
Yes, very famous names. Future drivers, that maybe can be in the Formula 1 in the short future. So let's support all of them.
Thank you very much, Felipe.
Felipe Massa, of course, former Ferrari Grand Prix racer, Sauber Grand Prix racer, and these days the FIA driver's representative. He's been presenting medals on the podium, and there you see is the Portuguese entry. Manuel Espirito Santo driving for Portugal, and he is 5th on the grid. He's another driver out of the Spanish Championship, in which he's currently 10th for the FIA Motorsport team. That finishes in 2 weeks' time at Barcelona. We've talked about the famous names. You've got Alistair Young, whose dad Alex Young was a Grand Prix racer. There's Charlie Wirtz, Alexander Wirtz's son, and as we've been saying as well, Pablo Sarrazin, Stéphane Sarrazin's son, who's a regular in the French F4 Championship, so he knows the circuit. There's Alistair Young, the Malaysian athlete, who lines up towards the rear of the grid. He's another regular single-seater racer, having done F4 and F3, but spends a lot of his time these days either as a mechanic or as a sim racer, as he tries to get the funding to participate more regularly. And it is going to be Alistair Young starting for Malaysia from 14th on the grid. There you can see number 22, the Austrian entry of Charlie Wirtz, son of Alexander Wirtz, grandson of great rallycrosser Franz Wirtz. And he had a spin in the qualifying session, but one to watch, I think, and a good start. If he can take the battle to Kimi Antonelli, it's going to be fascinating to see how those two squabble for the duration of the race. Charlie Wirtz, who has already won this year's UAE Formula 4 Championship, the United Arab Emirates Series at the start of the season, and has been a front-runner in the Italian Championship, won by that man Kimi Antonelli that out-qualified him earlier on in the day. So the grid now is being cleared. They'll have, of course, one formation lap before the cars are released. A very, very busy Paul Ricard circuit, not only in terms of the numbers of athletes here and disciplines being fought out, but also fans trackside. The 15-second board is there. And very shortly, John, time to get some warmth into the tyres.
Exactly, the very thing I was going to say, crucial on this parade lap is to try and get as much temperature as you possibly can. The Pirelli tire they're using is a very, what I would call, durable compound. It's not one of those sort of treacle and melting sugar type compounds that will stick to the tarmac. You've got to get energy into the tire, you've got to get temperature into the tire. The other thing about temperature is it equates to tire pressures. So there's always this balancing act of getting what is your static tire pressure. And then you've got to get your brakes up to temperature likewise. So there's so many things they've got to consider on this outlap. Do you want to go quickly enough to get those temperatures up and then have to come and sit in the grid and wait for the tail of the field to join onto the grid, or do you take it more slowly and risk not getting that tire temperature to the best you can achieve by going that little bit more quickly?
Kimi Antonelli for Italy starts on pole position with Austrian Charlie Wurz lining up alongside. Third on the grid is Germany, and that is Valentin Klus. And then the Brazilian champion, Pedro Clero, will line up fourth on this grid ahead of Portugal's Manuel Espirito Santo. And for Serbia, Filip Jenic starting sixth. Seventh is the Swiss driver Dario Gabanala, and eighth for Belgium is Laurens Lecertois. On the fifth row, Georgia, represented by Sandro Tavakilazzi, and then for 10th, the Australian driver Costa Taparis. 11th is where you find Spanish driver Bruno Ventos del Pino, and 12th on the grid for France, Pablo Sarrazin. 13th is the Korean driver Michael Shin, a regular in the British Championship, and Malaysian Alistair Young is with him. On the 8th row, a long way back actually, Jonas Dinesen, the Danish driver, and there in drama already is the Chilean car of Maria Jose Perez de Rodriguez. After Michael Shin and Alistair Young, you've got Julius Dinesen, as I say, on the 8th row, and Ethan Ho, the Chinese Taipei, starting 16th. 17th, the Indian driver Ruhan Alva, and for Hungary, Zeno Kovacs next. 19th on the grid, the Mozambique representative, Guilherme Rocha, and the Uzbekistan driver Ismail Ahmed next ahead of Jasper Tong, and if he's there, Maria Jose Perez Rodriguez for Chile, Valentino Mini for Panama, and Alexander Partishev for Ukraine round out the grid. But it looks as though Chile ain't going to be starting, or if the car does, it will be from the pit lane.
Yes, it's certainly a problem on the grid. Might be something that can be addressed quickly, but there's a slot in the pit wall to bring a car that doesn't get underway into the pit lane, and the team can get back and get that car operational and hopefully get it down to the pit lane exit, wait for the race to get underway, and then when the lights go out, wait until the field has passed before you can then join in. But it's a bit of a handicap. But mind you, the Chilean car was starting back on the 11th row of the grid, and some might say, actually, you know what, starting from the pit lane, 12 rows of cars, 24 cars into turn one, not necessarily the worst place to start.
Well, true, keep out of trouble. It's going to take a couple of laps to get things up to temperature. Of course, they were qualifying late morning. They're racing early evening. We are just after 5:30 local time, so the temperatures are starting to drop. It's still a very pleasant day here in the south of France, as Kimi Antonelli then brings the field up to the grid. He's part of the Mercedes Formula One Junior program. He started in karts. Last year he was in Italian F4. There is the Chilean car still trying to be started, but it looks like bodywork, engine cover off so they can peer in, and big shame that it's happening now. The only consolation is that it's not the main race where you need a good result for medals. But anyway, we'll keep an eye to whether Maria Jose Perez can get into the race. The rest of the field starting now to creep into place on this one-by-one staggered formation. And the car of Kimi Antonelli, which will be on the inside for turn one. Lots of the fans peering down from the balcony then on top of the pits to see the car slotting into place. Everybody, as we say, with the same car, run by the same team, on the same tyres. So it really is the ultimate arrive and drive track category here at the FIA Motorsport Games. The back of the grid, which is going to be Panama and Ukraine, slot into position. Then we'll have a green flag to say that everybody is back from the formation lap. There it is. The drivers now will look towards the lighting gantry. 5 red lights will come on. When they go out, the race will get underway. Kimi Antonelli then, having taken pole position for Italy, starts on pole position. Charlie Wurz for Austria with him at the front of the grid. 4 red lights, 5 red lights, lights out, blast off now. Good getaway by Wurz. Good getaway also there by Valentin Klus, the German driver. 1 or 2 slow away, but as they go down towards turn one, Italy it is that steals an advantage. 2 cars left on the grid. Wurz to the inside for Austria, but Antonelli nails the start and he leads.
And just looking down the inside, and there are 3 cars. Oh dear, problem on the grid. Fortunately, some are cutting across the inside from turn 1. Well, half the field seems, and somebody's off on the barrier between turns 1 and turn 2. So I think more or less immediately we're going to have to see a full course yellow bodywork already being pinged.
And broken suspension and a tyre.
That's,
yeah.
I think it's Charlie Wurz.
So mayhem breaks out going through the chicane, and yet Vert's in strife then as the cars battle their way up towards Soundbone for the first time. I said this was the race to keep out of trouble. They weren't listening, were they?
I said it as well, and they weren't listening to me either.
Well, those that were delayed on the grid, Belgium and Georgia, and I think also Hong Kong, China. Chile hasn't yet got into the race either as the cars come along the Mistral for the first time. So Kimi Antonelli it is that's managed to make a break while everybody else has been squabbling behind and tripping over themselves up towards the chicane. They come for the first time. One up the escape road, goes straight on, misses the braking point, but he's going to have to slow, otherwise he'll gain an advantage there. The Serbian car of Felipe Massa bouncing over the curb, and there's the one I think that went straight on. Is that Verts with his punctured tyre?
Well, I know whoever it is, he's having to crawl back to the pit lane, and that's his race over damaged front wing because they come through scene. So a bit of a wild start. Oh, it is, look indeed. So you can see that that was Portugal's wing that was flapping around.
Oh, I thought it was Germany. I thought it was Valentin Klus for Germany, but we'll double check in a moment when the cars come towards us, because as the field turns through, another one with damage there going through is Australia's Costa Taparis. So there are going to be quite a few with not only damaged cars, but damaged chances in the main race, because they're all compromised on the grid for the main race on which the medals are to be awarded. There, look, with the nose hanging off the car and diving into the pit lane comes number 11. So that is Valentin Klus, the German entry, and he was third on the grid. So that's another of the front runners eliminated by the zealotry on the first lap. Leader comes through them. So 20 minutes this race, remember, over the timing line goes Kimi Antonelli, who leads the way by nearly 4 seconds from Portugal's Manuel Espirito Santo. Pedro Clara, the Brazilian, is third.
So contact coming down side by side into turn one. Oh, and oh dear me, again. I mean, this is what you get with young single-seater racing. There's no quarter given. And I don't know what the steward or the director is going to say about that, whether they gained an advantage, whether they'll have to drop back, I don't know.
Well, there with damage is Valentin Klus, so he needs a new nose section. There is Charlie Verts, who's got an absolutely destroyed rear tyre, and possibly worse, and another big dive there up on the inside. That was number 14, the Ukraine driver Alexander Partishev, who is coming up from the very back of the grid. Now Partishev from 24th on the grid was 14th at the end of the first lap. He's absolutely on a charge right now. The order is Italy, Portugal, Brazil, then it is Spain, Switzerland 5th, 6th, Serbia.
So they're now beginning to stretch out a little bit. They're not quite the side-by-side as they were on the opening lap, coming up into the chicane, albeit towards the tail of the field. 1 or 2 are, but they're beginning to sort themselves out. And once that testosterone level begins to sort of subside after that frantic opening lap, maybe a little bit of brain power can actually take over from that surge of adrenaline.
Just saw Charlie Verts walking away with his distinctive Austrian Remus overalls. He sadly is out of the race, and he's going to be near the back of the grid for tomorrow. Was there trying to squabble back onto the racetrack.
That was Serbia.
Filipe Massa, the Serbian driver, got hung out to dry, didn't he? And then couldn't really get back on the line. So there's still a squabbling. Costa Taparis comes up to have a go at him, can't find a way through. But if you finish this race, you're going to finish it relatively well, I would have thought, because the danger is that so many are tripping over themselves. The finishing order compared to the grid is going to be very jumbled behind Kimi Antonelli, who has been able just to drive off already into the distance.
Yeah, he had the advantage of getting the best start, got into turn one, clear of the rest of the field, and from second place back. It was a case of mayhem on the opening lap, and 2 of the front runners, Austria and Germany, getting tagged. So there is the advantage visual. It must be nearly 5 seconds, well, 4.2 to be accurate. So Antonelli has got this race in his pocket. The only thing that may change it is if we go back to a full course yellow, then a safety car towards the end, and then go green for the open for the last lap or 2. But I think right now it looks like it's Antonelli's to lose.
So the cars all bunching up behind. Now that was the incident had already happened there to dislodge Valentin Klus's wing and to give the puncture to Charlie Verts. That's why he was limping into the pit lane, but they'd already tangled coming into the corner. Another one skipping across the centre of the run down towards the Virage du Camp. There'd been another car off in the background earlier on in the lap as well. 3 of them were stranded on the grid. So it was a really frantic first few corners. But out front, it's Kimi Antonelli. 4.2 seconds clear of anybody else. Antonelli then coming now up towards the chicane on the Mistral and just being able to, as I say, drive clear of everybody else, keep out of trouble. And it's probably unlikely he'll see another car in the race now, because unless it's somebody out of the pits, then he's not going to catch any traffic, and he's pulling away from the rest all the while.
Yeah, and more or less from the exit of the chicane up to scene, he's almost got that straight in terms of distance between himself and the second place Espirito Santo. There is the second place car amongst the gaggle, and another one making its way through. Was that a self-induced over-braking?
Yeah.
But he's got to let the cars that are coming through the chicane regain their position. And more or less, I think he may have achieved that.
So there, Australia versus India. That is Costa Taparis versus the Indian athlete Ruhan Alva. And Alva is under attack as well there from Denmark. Julius Dinesen goes through on the inside, so good past that, but Alva ran wide.
Yeah, well, he just opened the door and Denmark says, I'll have that, thank you very much, and made the pass. So, different lines in Le Bousset. We've seen it throughout the weekend. People like to go high and then swoop down late. Others come in lower and sort of hug the circumference on the inside of the corner.
So the field here turning down towards the Virage Dupont, then heading up towards the timing line once more. There, number 24, the Malaysian driver, that's Alistair Young, up to 11th. So he's another one that's gained ground as Antonelli goes through now 5 seconds clear. It won't surprise you to learn he's done the fastest lap of the race. But for second place, Portugal, Brazil, Switzerland, absolutely together. The Swiss athlete, which is Dario Cabanela, has got better and better over the course of the weekend. 5th then as they went through for Spain that time around was Bruno Del Pinto. And also you got Michael Shin for Korea, who's been racing in the British Championship, in the mix as well. Serbia ahead of Australia, ahead of Denmark here. Julius Dinesen, the Danish champion, makes a move on the inside, up the curb, but he's gone through.
He did. He took a lot of the curb to achieve it. And again, whether we're going to see any track limit penalties being handed out, we don't know, but that certainly was a move where probably only a part of the left-hand side of the car was actually on the racetrack itself.
Onto the Mistral straight they come then as the race approaches half distance. This 20-minute dash for grid positions for the main race. These Formula 4 single-seaters, this qualifying race to determine the grid for tomorrow's main race, the usual format in the FIA Motorsport games for the single-seaters. As into the chicane they pour them. Australian Costa Taparis still hunting for more places, delayed on the opening lap of the race, keeping Ruhan Alva at bay. Challenge being made here, look, because you've got there on the outside line Switzerland, on the inside line is Brazil. So this is for third place as they turn through Senior, and it is Swiss driver Cabanela that gets forced out wide. Dario Cabanela wide out of Senior, but then he gets the inside at Le Bousset. The door opens for him and through he goes, but Brazil fights back on the inside.
Always dangerous trying to get up the inside of the late part of Bousset, because the car that's on the high side is going to drop down to make its very late apex, and that was almost a collision between Switzerland and the Brazil car. And you have to be very aware, good spatial awareness, that in that particular corner there's a variety of options drivers can take, and don't close down somebody who's put themselves in a position when it's almost too late, or it is too late.
To the timing line they come then with 11 minutes on the clock. Kimi Antonelli has gone through and leads by, you can see the margin, a huge one over Portugal. Manuel Espirito Santo, 6 seconds now the margin. Dario Cabanela third for Switzerland, fourth Pedro Claro, the Brazilian champion, and a big effort being made there. Look, Julius Dinesen for Denmark up on the inside line, breaks late, goes ahead of Serbia. Filip Jenic drops back.
Yeah, the good pass was a bit of a stretch because he was being forced out to the left, but stood his ground, got him alongside. Serbia's coming back, and now down the hill into the chicane. Maybe Serbia is going to have the advantage because they are on the inside. Yeah, it's got the place back again. This is what single-seater, junior single-seater racing is all about.
But people say you can't overtake in slicks and wing single-seaters. You can in the right cars on the right venue. And there, being run out wide, is India. That was Ruhan Alva, and he's about to drop another place because on the inside line goes Valentino Mini for Panama, number 77. And wheel to wheel, they turn onto the Mistral with Mini being run out wide over the curb. They're turbocharged engines, remember. Now the power kicks in as they make the run along the straight. 3 wide there.
Yes, getting very and off the track momentarily on the inside. Be careful under braking because you're going to be in the dirty bit of the racetrack. When you get on the brakes, you're not going to have the grip that you would have had on the racing line, and we just avoid watching. Well, they all managed to get in and get through amazingly without any contact.
So in the middle of all of that was Malaysia, Alistair Young. And he now comes onto the Mistral straight up towards Senior as the race trips into the second part now. So out of that shuffling, you've got Michael Shin for Korea up into 6th, Julius Dinesen 7th, more side by side there because Alexander Pardyshev for Ukraine is on the outside line of Alistair Young. And Young goes through, Pardyshev gets run out wide, so Ruhan Alva for India goes through, Pardyshev switches lines, comes back on the inside, retakes the place.
Yeah, I mean, I think this particular corner, Le Bousset, is going to be one of the favourites. around the racetrack, but basically any part of the racetrack where there's a corner, there's going to be somebody in one of these cars who's going to make a move, take a pop, and try and just by maybe more good luck than judgment get through.
And it's a long, long line of cars as well, which underlines, A, how competitive the drivers are, how evenly matched they are, and how a one-make category works. A challenge there, look, because Costa Taparis gets up on the inside of Serbia. Australia versus Serbia coming out of the Virage Dupont, but Filip Jenic for Serbia goes back ahead, got the drive off the corner, and Serbia hangs onto the place as they come through. That's for 8th. 10th is Panama. Look, Valentino Mini right with them. 77, the Panamanian car goes to the outside line, can't find a way through. Now goes to the inside. Still no way through.
And Australia just about got the nose in front of Panama. So here we go down the hill again, into the braking zone, into the chicane. And whether Panama is going to be sufficiently close, it doesn't look to me as if they've got an opportunity on this occasion. But there'll be many others. The next one will be braking into the chicane.
Indeed so. And there, a big dive by Australia. Costa Taparis on the inside of Filip Jenic. They touch. Jenic gets airborne. Crash lands back to earth. But that's done. Definitely damage to the Serbian entry. It's got no real pickup coming out of the corner, and I fear that Jenic is bound for the pit lane. He does now start to increase his pace, but not significantly.
Yeah, there's a bit of bodywork came off, but whether there's any damage to the suspension, the car went up on 2 wheels, banged down again.
So Costa Taparis, the Australian, was involved in that. You can see the damage on the front of his car as well. He's still busy battling with Panama. Valentino Mini, number 77, the driver, as he tries to swing through the chicane. Taparis for Australia is back ahead. Now, all of this is the battle for 8th place, but again, it could be that post-race there is a penalty that heads the Australian driver's way. We'll wait and see.
So here, the swarm of bees that comprises Formula 4, the midfield battle. And almost by the corner, there's changes taking place. So down into Le Bousset, who's going to go high, who's going to take the chance running down low. Well, there we can see just on the exit 2 cars, 1 low, 1 high, but no change of position.
So Costa Taparis then still hanging onto the place ahead of Valentino Mini. He's dropped back from the pack ahead, but he's hanging onto the position. This was what happened then between Australia and Serbia. It was a bold dive. And the contact was out of the corner, wasn't it, as they interlock wheels?
Yeah, it was just interlocking wheels, and of course the car stuck in the middle, and then another car coming down the right-hand side. So essentially it was one of those usual situations. It was avoidable, but hey guys, we're racing.
Exactly right. Australia, of course, lucky to get away with that, because it could have done damage to the suspension of that car as the field pours through. There, going through his career, Michael Shin. Number 7 is the Danish athlete Julius Dinesen. Then Australia, Costa Taparis only just ahead now of Valentino Mini for Panama and Alexander Partishev for Ukraine in 10th place. And a challenge there. Belgium gaining ground. Lucas Lecertua through on the inside line after a badly delayed start.
Yeah, got through easily and cleanly, so he can move forward or think about moving forward. As we look at 7 seconds, the advantage is first to second, then it's only 0.8 of a second from second to third. So that's a battle that's going on for those 2 final podium steps for the silver or the bronze award.
We've got Ukraine's Alexander Partishev being looked at for track limits. We've got that incident between Taparis and Jenic, who's headed into the pit lane, incidentally, being looked at as well. So the officials are being kept honest in this, with 6 minutes of the race to go. And Kimi Antonelli, remember him, still miles clear of anybody else. There he is, way out in front.
Still got the fastest race lap as well on lap 4. But his last lap was, well, it was about a second, just over a second down. So he's in a cruise mode with just 5.5 minutes remaining.
Rest of the field comes pouring out of the chicane on the Mistral then, with Valentino Mini attacking the car of Costa Taparis on the inside line. Panama versus Australia. Panama goes through. So Valentino Mini gets the position. Finally, he's gone 8th. Panama ahead of Australia, chipping his way forward. And look, for Ukraine, Alexander Partishev is right there as well. He might be exceeding track limits on occasions, but he's another rapid racer.
Great to see this kind of racing. I know sometimes it's exposed up the inside. He's brave, I have to say.
Absolutely.
He made that opportunity for himself. There was only about a car's width, and he put his car into that space and got away with it.
Come back to an earlier sentence. People say you can't overtake in slicks and wing single-seaters. Oh, yes, you can. That is Filip Jenic out of the race after his damage, and more bodywork flies.
Rear wing.
That's the front wing of Costa Taparis' car.
Wing, yes.
Remember, he damaged that when he hit Jenic for Serbia. Now it's come adrift, so Taparis is going to go backwards.
He's going to go backwards with a handful of understeer all the way around the racetrack. So that's going to be lying on the racetrack. Will that be in a place that's going to be considered hazardous or not. 4.5 minutes of the race remaining.
Indeed so, and the driving standards flag you can see is being offered to the Belgian entry, Lucas Lecertois, as there. Ruhan Alva for India is ahead of Lecertois as they come out of turn 2. Next in that queue behind them is Ethan Ho for Chinese Taipei. So Belgium on the attack, India at the head of the queue. Chinese Taipei comes up to the outside, and Costa Tapares with an evil handling car. The Australian keeps Malaysia at bay for now. Alistair Young looking for a way past as they wriggle their way out of the chicane. Nose to tail, those two.
Yeah, but Australia's going to be so slow in all the corners around, the 15 turns around Paul Ricard, and all he can do is just hang on and brave it out. 3.5 minutes to go. He's about to be overtaken, runs way, way wide out of turn 7 onto the Mistral straight.
So 2 of the front runners, Filip Jenic for Serbia, Charlie Wirtz for Austria, out of the race. They're being squeezed off the racetrack. Lucas Lecertois, he fights back. Young for Malaysia on the outside of Tapares from Australia, who breaks as late as he dares into the chicane and hangs onto the place. Another battle pack building up nicely behind, with 3-4 cars now running as one.
Well, Australia's still hanging in there. It makes you wonder just how efficient the front wing in these cars is, if he can run, still maintain his position, or he's being under a big challenge.
To the inside line there is Belgium, and Lucas Lecertois goes through, goes ahead of India, so that puts Belgium 12, as out wide goes Australia. Costa Tapares loses the place finally there to Alistair Young, who's gone through on the inside. So that's Malaysia up ahead of Australia. And 3 minutes and counting on the clock as they come out of Le Beausset. And more damage, more drama. That was Belgium going off the racetrack. Lucas Lecertois has picked up a little bit of damage, but he's still there, still fighting, and they're absolutely wheel to wheel.
I mean, he was way, way off the corner on the exit of Le Beausset, but came back on again with the same enthusiasm as he went off.
Absolutely right, as the cars here scrabble their way back down through the approach to the Virage du Pont, and 3 wide into the braking zone. Is that going to work? Amazingly, it seems to. India forced out wide, through on the inside line. There goes Chinese Taipei, and there's contact coming out of the corner, 1 in the wall. And that's Chinese Taipei. That is Ethan Ho, who got turned around. I thought he just gained the place. 2 minutes on the clock. That, I would think, is going to be certainly a yellow flag coming out of the corner because of the danger zone, but it could end up, sadly, being another race that ends under the safety car. As there, look side by side. India just gets back ahead of Georgia. Sandro Tevak-Kaladze falls back. He was another one delayed at the start.
So wherever you look, it's just going nuts. Australia's still running. Managing to, I don't know how he's managed to drive the car. I don't know how effective the front wing is, because if he can run at this pace, well, maybe it's there more for decorative reasons and for sponsorship reasons than it is a serious aerodynamic device. But you can see coming through turn 6 how much understeer he's got. Nevertheless, hanging in, doing a good job to Paris, running in 11th place, having lost that 10th place to Alistair, not Alex, Alex is the dad, Alistair Young.
Safety car, as expected, and it's going to be a race that finishes under the safety car now. So safety car deployed, and with less than a lap time left in the race, just like the GT Cup earlier on, it's going to be a safety car finish. Real shame that. So the safety car deployed, and that means that after a race where he's been on his own, Kimi Antonelli is going to end up with the cars catching up to him right at the very end. Actually, is he going to squeeze another lap out of it? It's a pointless last lap, even if he does. I mean, in a way, it'd be easier just to put the checkered flag out this time. You've got the cars slowed down, put the flag out, because you're not going to change the result by letting them drive around for another lap. But anyway, better brains than mine are in race control. So the safety car has been called for. Everybody, therefore, slows right down. And just over half a minute remains to the end of the race. It's all for that car you can see of Ethan Ho that is a retirement. And so through they come, but the safety car will bring them round for 1 lap, and then the checkered flag will be shown. So Kimi Antonelli wins the Formula 4 Cup qualifying race. The safety car now sets off, but as I say, this is a very pointless lap because the order can't change. So the field goes through with the order being Italy, Portugal and Switzerland. And then you've got Brazil in 4th place. But all these finishing positions sort out the grid for tomorrow. Right, let's try and piece it all together, because it was a real old scrum. Up the inside went Chinese Taipei against India. Got ahead. Is it another interlocking wheel situation? Yeah. It is, and that's turned him around. Yeah,
the interlocking wheel was inevitable. They were so close together on the exit of the final turn. And again, it's the dive down the inside. And then they get together and then spits off. There you can see. And all of a sudden goes off at 90 degrees to the racetrack and reverses into the wall. Maybe got a little bit of whiplash. I saw when he got out of the car holding his wrist and wondering, is that something that's going to be a problem, or is it just a little sort of a strain that it'll vanish overnight?
Well, there is a very frustrated Ethan Ho, the Chinese Taipei racer, having to watch the cars come across the line now without him. He's raced quite a lot in single-seaters in America. The 17-year-old, he was the runner-up 2 years ago, the Skip Barber race series, and okay, was getting stuck in. But again, we talked about it before the race. This wasn't the race to get stuck in. That's tomorrow's race, and for some, it's bitten and bitten badly, hasn't it?
It's inevitable. I mean, everybody knows, they're all spoken to, they're all told what they've got to do. This is a race to a race, but you know, just think about what's more important. Today has an importance, but tomorrow is when you're going to win your medals.
So the cars coming out of the chicane on the Mistral. When they were racing, largely, it was good racing, it was hard racing, it was exactly what we wanted to see, and what you were predicting, what you were looking forward to.
It's what you get with junior single-seater racing. A bunch of young competitors, 15 to 17, and, you know, they're so pumped up with adrenaline, testosterone, and red mist, and this is what you get when you're young. We all have had it, we've all been guilty of it, and eventually it drains away and you learn more about control and when to move and when not to move, and when an opportunity arises, is it going to be a closing gap, or is it something you want to decide to avoid and then wait for another opportunity?
So the cars make their way out of Le Beausset, and Kimi Antonelli then will take the win in this qualifying race for the KCMG F4 Cup. And the safety car brings them around for, as I say, what has been a largely pointless lap, because the order hasn't been able to change because they can't go racing. But rather than put the checkered flag out a lap early, or a few seconds early, it's been decided to run them round behind the safety car. So Kimi Antonelli will win and therefore take another pole position. This time it'll be the important one for the main race. And as the cars come then now out of the Virage du Pont, the safety car stays out, brings them across the line. So the clock has hit 0. Up towards the line they come. And the observer in the safety car pointing at the checkered flag, which is shown. And so the qualifying race finishes with the safety car leading them across the line. Kimi Antonelli is the winner for Italy from Manuel Espirito Santo for Portugal, who's driven well, actually, all day. He hasn't been one of the stars, necessarily, of the Spanish Championship, but he's looked pretty pacey here. And a second place on the grid for the main race tomorrow is pretty impressive. And third for Switzerland, Dario Cabanela, who was only 7th on the grid. He's somebody else. I know he benefited a bit by incidents ahead, but even so, he kept out of trouble and raced well, gained ground. So Dario Cabanela also coming through strongly. But the winner of the qualifying race is Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the Italian athlete, and he wins in the end by, for what it's worth, 0.8 of a second, but that doesn't really tell you the whole story of that qualifying race.
Everybody else behind, it was a matter of sorting yourselves out on the run into turn 1. And the driver that managed to do that best of all was the Portugal entry, Manuel Espirito Santo. If there hadn't been all that melee that went on the opening lap, maybe he wouldn't have finished second. But the key is he kept out of trouble and he got himself up into a position where he finished second. That, for me, is more important.
Let's look at the results of the qualifying race for the KCMG F4 Cup. Italy takes the win from Portugal with Switzerland third. Fourth, Brazil, ahead of Spain, and then Korea in 6th place. Denmark 7th from Panama, Ukraine 9th and Malaysia 10th. Belgium 11th, Australia faded because of the damage to 12th ahead of Hungary. India dropped back, Georgia 15th after a bad start. Kimi Antonelli then the winner for Italy. Manuel Espirito Santo 2nd for Portugal and Dario Cabanela in 3rd. 4th, the Brazilian driver Pedro Claro ahead of the Spanish entry of Bruno Del Pino. Then Michael Shin, the Korean, in 6th ahead of Julius Dinesen, Valentino Mini, Alexander Partishev and Alistair Young to round out the top 10. And those that we lost, Austria, Serbia and Chinese Taipei, with Chile joining in but being a lap down after that delay starting from the pits. Not a great race, sadly, for France on home soil. Pablo Sarrazin only in 17th, and that gives him quite a bit of work to do tomorrow. So a good win for Kimi Antonelli. It wasn't really in much doubt if you have been following F4, both the German and the Italian championships, because he's won both this year. And he comes from good racing stock. His father, Marco Antonelli, a very successful team owner. And Jan Kimi already signed to the Mercedes F1 junior program repaying that faith here this weekend as he scores honours in the qualifying race for Italy. Gives us a really jumbled grid for tomorrow, and watching the likes of Charlie Wurz and to a degree as well Felipe Massa trying to get through the pack will be interesting.
Yeah, Valentin Klaus likewise in the German entry down in 20th place, or classified 20. So a lot of potential winners are well and truly out of position. And in reality, their opportunity to get through to the front of the field is going to be restricted by just simply the duration of the race.
So as the cars make their way to the pit lane, being brought round by the safety car, a win for Kimi Antonelli in this F4 qualifying race. Let's look at the highlights of that race. Most of the field blasted away, but there were some stragglers that were stranded on the grid. They got away late, and for Chile, the car didn't get away from the pit lane until a lap into the race. The cars turned their way down through turn 1, and drama as France had problems straight off. Pablo Sarrazin in strife, as also did Austria. Charlie Wurz getting collected by Valentin Klaus of Germany, and that did a tyre, and so Wurz ended up heading to the pit lane in retirement, Klaus to the pit lane, and a new nose cone needed. Good battle between Brazil and Switzerland. Pedro Claro going wide, and Dario Cabanela fighting his way through on the inside line. And then Costa Taparis trying to find a way past Filip Jenic for Serbia, who was launched into the air. That was the Serbian athlete out of the race, and the damage for Taparis caused him to fall to 12th place. They've been squabbling quite a lot even before that incident, as the field had battled their way up to the end of 20 minutes of racing. But this was what brought out a safety car late race, as Chinese Taipei's Ethan Ho tangled with Indian driver Ruhan Alva and put himself in the wall. It meant, therefore, that the safety car was deployed, and the last lap ended behind the safety car, but it made no alteration to the order. A win for Kimi Antonelli, with the rest of the pack having finally caught up to him. He'd been away a dot in the distance for the bulk of the race. So as the sun sets here early evening at Paul Ricard, it is just after 6 o'clock local time. They've got time now to go away, have a think about that, and to look at data ready for tomorrow and come back, in some cases, hopefully stronger and better.
Well, think about it. That's pretty important to think about. If any of these competitors review what we've just been commentating on, hopefully they might realize and learn that all the instincts that they've got, which is just they're coming out of every pore in their body, sometimes that needs to be just more gently considered.
Well, certainly Kimi Antonelli looking very good, and with not just track activity, but the off-track disciplines as well. We've got now France with 2 gold medals, Belgium with 1 gold and a bronze. The Netherlands has got 1 gold and 2 silvers achieved by Spain. A silver and a bronze for Sweden, a silver for Germany. The Czech Republic has got a bronze, and so also has the United Kingdom, and that medal table starting to build now as more and more disciplines are completed.
Indeed, one assumes there's no Italy on that table as yet, but they probably will be there, one would assume, after this race tomorrow, if Antonelli performs as he did in this, what you might describe as a qualifying race. So look to see where his future is going to be. I suspect it's very bright.
Yes, indeed. Very much a single-seater career beckons for Kimi Antonelli. But yeah, that medals table, it'll change and change again over the course of the weekend. Some great views from up on high. Although Paul Ricard is a very flat circuit itself, he's got a little bit of rise and fall, but not much. But you actually forget that you're sort of on top of a table here. Any direction out of the circuit, there's a big, big drop downhill. Very popular part of the world with cyclists. Not very popular with the motorists that are stuck behind them coming up a hill. But you can see the road out of the circuit, the airstrip between the car park and the main road there. And some of the fans have decided that that's it. We've seen the racing for today. We don't want to stay for qualifying, which is next. We're going to go and come back tomorrow for even more action.
But that's the very reason why cars are fitted with horns, to hoot them at the cyclists.
The FIA road safety campaign promoted by John Watson, everybody. So the Formula 4 drivers will be back tomorrow, and it's going to be another really interesting race. You've had some good single-seater battling in that. We look forward to even more when the pressure is on for the main race. It'll start at 9:25 tomorrow, so it's the breakfast race for the F4 Cup tomorrow. Join us for that. It'll be a cracker.
Well, that's decided the KCMG F4 grid. But Darren, that's what it's all about, isn't it? That was a qualifying race. You've got to try and... how do you control and contain these young drivers?
I mean, that's always going to be the case with a race like that, short and sweet. And they, it's in for qualifying. So they've got to make hay where they can. And there's going to be little risky moves they've got to take. But the ones with a bit more experience, they just sort of weigh it up a fraction longer and just make sure that